This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com with your Sunday update for this 21st day of March 2010. And now for the real news. Lawyers for four men indicted for allegedly planning to bomb a Jewish center in Riverdale, New York, have revealed that the entire scheme was concocted and planned by an FBI informant in the group. The defense in the case has filed a dismissal motion, citing the claim that Shahid Hussein was a paid FBI informant whose mission was to radicalize disaffected Muslims and recruit them to join a fake terror plot. The motion suggests that Hussein was provided with as much as $250,000 for the case, and had a government-provided BMW, Hummer, and other cars to make him appear to be a well-funded foreign terrorist operative. The government well knew that their case had been a government-inspired creation from day one, and that the defendants had not been independently seeking weapons or targets, the dismissal motion said. This development was by no means a surprise to analysts, who have noted that every major domestic terror plot in the United States over the last 2 decades has been aided, abetted, funded, supplied, and often created by paid government informants. 8 years before bombs and nanothermite demolished the World Trade Center in New York, the original 1993 World Trade Center bombing was exposed as an FBI operation. The man who supplied the bomb-making materials to the bombers, a former Egyptian army officer named Emad Salem, was revealed to be an FBI informant who had been told to deliver the materials to the plotters. The original plan was to deliver fake materials so that the bombing could not go ahead, but FBI agents overseeing the case ordered him to give the real supplies to the plotters, and the attack went ahead, killing 6 and injuring 1,042 people. In December of 1993, the head of the FBI New York field office, James N. Fox, issued a blanket denial that the FBI had foreknowledge of the attacks, and the media stopped reporting on the story. Since then, the actual recordings between Salem and his FBI handler, Special Agent John Antichev, have been released.
We start already building the bomb, which went off in the World Trade Center. It was built by supervision from the Bureau and the DA, and we was all informed about it, and we know that the bomb start to be built. By who? By your confidential informant. What a wonderful, great case. Well. And then he put his head in the sand and said, oh, no, that's not true. He is son of a bitch. Okay, well, it's built with a different way in another place, and that's it.
Well, don't make any risks, decisions. I'm just trying to be as honest with you as I can.
Of course, I appreciate that.
And as far as the payments go and everything like that, they're there. I'll guarantee you that they are there.
In 2007, convicted Oklahoma City bombing co-conspirator Terry Nichols was able to file an affidavit in U.S. District Court in Utah, alleging that the OKC bombing in Timothy McVeigh had been directed by a high-ranking FBI official. The affidavit indicated that Nichols had been trying to go public with the information about McVeigh's FBI help for years, but had been prevented from speaking to the press. He had also contacted former Attorney General John Ashcroft with the information, but never received a reply. In 2006, it was revealed that the so-called Miami 7, who had allegedly been attempting to strike targets in the U.S., including the Sears Tower, had in fact been organized, led, and supplied by a government informant who had convinced them that he was an al-Qaeda operative. The case disappeared from the headlines after it became apparent that the men were in fact a group of unemployed underachievers with below-average cognitive abilities living in a warehouse.
Now, fortunately, because of the fine work of law enforcement, these men were unable to advance their deadly plot.
A dreadful potential catastrophe averted, and clearly, government wouldn't bother to hold a press conference if this were not a major step in the war on terror, right? All right, so good night, everybody, and, questions.
Did the men have any actual contact with any members of al-Qaeda that you know of?
The answer to that is no.
Did you find any explosives, weapons?
Now, and you raise a good point.
You do raise a good point, that point being that these deadly international terrorists had very slyly disguised themselves as a bunch of dipshits living in a warehouse.
In 2008, the so-called Fort Dix terror plot was also revealed to be the single-handed creation of 2 FBI informants who created a plot to stir 6 foreign-born Muslims into taking on the U.S. Army at Fort Dix. The plot was foiled when the dim-witted conspirators asked a Circuit City employee to transfer their jihad training video onto DVD and asked police for maps to the Fort Dix Army base. Analysts are expecting this latest revelation to also be quickly swept under the rug by the corporate media, and for the next large-scale domestic terror bust to be reported as if none of these previous incidents ever took place. In other news this week, a judge has rejected a government-proposed settlement for Ground Zero first responders who are still dying from the toxic conditions on the pile in New York in late 2001. A preliminary deal in which the government sought to pay some 10,000 Ground Zero workers a total of $657 million was sent back to be renegotiated after Judge Alvin Hellerstein said that the proposal was unfair. He noted that a third of the entire payout was to be paid to lawyers, not victims, and has said the 90-day time limit for accepting the proposal did not leave workers with enough time to consider the proposal. The claims stem from a series of incidents in which the government knowingly lied to the public about air conditions in Manhattan at the time.
Mrs. Whitman went on national TV, smiled at the camera, and told everybody everything is safe, and it wasn't.
As I say, asbestos was in there, is in those buildings, lead is in those buildings. There are the VOCs. However, the concentrations are such that they don't pose a health hazard. We're going to make sure everybody's safe.
In 2007 hearings, EPA Chief Christine Todd Whitman and former OSHA Administrator John Henshaw were grilled by Congress over their statements about air quality, statements that neither were even willing to express remorse over.
Do you now regret saying it was safe for New Yorkers to go back to work 6 days after the terrorist attack? Was that a mistake?
Not within the financial district. On the pile was a different circumstance. Sir, I do not regret that.
But in the area around it was okay?
All of our data indicated that it was okay.
In other explosive 9/11 news this week, a letter to the 9/11 Commission from former Attorney General John Ashcroft, former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, and ex-CIA Director George Tenet has been leaked. The letter confirms what many researchers have known for years, namely that the 9/11 Commission was warned by the Bush administration not to probe too deeply into the treatment of detainees accused of terrorist activities. The letter reads in part, quote, "In response to the Commission's expansive requests for access to secrets, the executive branch has provided such access in full cooperation. There is, however, a line that the Commission should not cross. The line separating the Commission's proper inquiry into the September 11, 2001 attacks from interference with the government's ability to safeguard the national security, including protection of Americans, from future terrorist attacks." End quote. The warning is the smoking gun confirming what has long been known, that the 9/11 Commission was not allowed to address how much of the information in their report had been extracted from informants through torture. The Commission report infamously sources numerous claims back to the interrogation of alleged 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, without addressing the fact that he was waterboarded hundreds of times during captivity, and that his children were held and tortured by the CIA to get KSM to talk. On a positive note, this has not been a good week for the banksters who engineered the current global financial meltdown by, among other things, pawning toxic subprime loans off as AAA-rated mortgage-backed securities and collateralized debt obligations. In the latest development, Connecticut Attorney General Richard Blumenthal has filed suit against ratings agencies Moody's Corp and Standard & Poor over the fact that they knowingly rated toxic subprime-backed junk paper as AAA investments.
The companies said to investors that the ratings were objective and independent, knowing that they were very heavily influenced by methodologies that were skewed, compliance procedures that were defective, compensation structures that were flawed, all because they were catering to the investment banks and other issuers.
Also emerging this week, Bernie Madoff has been assaulted in the North Carolina prison where he is being held for running a $50 billion Ponzi scheme. The scheme was allowed to continue by SEC investigators who covered up repeated warnings that Madoff was running a scam. Now it is being reported that an assault by another inmate in December of last year left Madoff with fractured ribs, facial and head lacerations, and a broken nose. In December of last year, it also emerged that Goldman Sachs was arming its workers in preparation for expected assault against its staff after an extensive McClatchy news investigation showed that Goldman had positioned itself to benefit from the housing collapse of 2007 and then made it happen. So far, no such violence against Goldman has been reported. Now, stay tuned to CorbettReport.com for episode 122 of the Corbett Report podcast, Hello Iceland, where we discover how that small nation has rebuffed foreign banksters and is positioning itself to become the world leader in the protection of free speech and online whistleblowing.